though, again, we want to pick up where we left off the last time here. And we're talking about building curriculum units and incorporating multicultural pieces. How do you know if the units are going to work with what you have to work with in your classroom? So we've talked about their excellent planning devices, but you don't have to get pigeonholed into them. You have to look at that curriculum guide or curriculum map. You have to decide if the units in your school's textbook are valuable and important, as well as whether you agree with the way they're organized and the quality of learning experiences they contain. Now, you have to be very careful here because you are given a curriculum that has been mapped in a school. You don't go to the principal and say your books suck. I'm doing my own thing. Yeah, no, 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 no. It may not be what you think you want to use, but you supplement, you enhance. You don't change, you don't deviate from. They're there for a reason. They have been prescribed. The Board of Education, who is, by the way, sorry, Board of Education, by the way, is over the superintendent. So this Board of Education has approved the curriculum that the superintendent has come to them with. It is not within your purview ever to say, this is terrible, I hate this, I'm not doing it. You won't be keeping a job if you do that. You need to consider whether using a particular textbook will result in achieving the state mandated standards. Will it result in achieving the goals and outcomes you have for your class? Your goals and outcomes for your class are going to be dictated by your curriculum guide. How you meet those is up to you. In this curriculum guide I keep telling you about, there should be K to 12 in a school district, if it's a K-12 district, or however many grades are encompassed in that particular district. They should be all of those the hard subjects should be, they have to be aligned to the national standards. Along with that alignment must be an assessment. So you need to decide, you need to look at that. That's why I keep telling you and I keep bringing it up to get it into your memory banks. You need to be sure that you see the school's curriculum guide or curriculum map, that's made available to you as a living document. Because if you go to a different textbook company, that entire map for that particular subject area must be retooled. So it has to be a living document. I did this with 2 school districts many years ago, aligned their curriculum with the then Illinois State Learning Standards. And one school, I know they have to have them now. One school used what we gave them. The other school said, you know what? After we spent over a year working on this, K to 12, they said, you know what, we don't have the money in the budget to make copies for all the teachers, so we're just going to keep them in the central office. It became a dead document. The teachers never saw all the work they put into it. So you don't ever want that to happen. If the textbook does not coincide with your planned outcomes, or if you disagree with the quality or the organizational pattern of the book, you have several options. Now, this holds true for most things. But if you have a subject area such as history, where you're going down a timeline, or mathematics, where one lesson builds on the next, you have to be very, very careful with this. But you need to review textbooks, and you need to know what you're looking at when you're reviewing textbooks. In reviewing textbooks, you must also decide if the textbook fits your students and whether they respond to the learning needs of your students. Now, by knowing your students, this textbook, you're going to keep this textbook for years, okay? At least 5 or 6 years until it comes around the cycle again. So how am I going to know my kids 5 years from now? You know the community. You need to know the area. You need to know what is acceptable in that area and what is not acceptable in that area. There are books, for instance, in the English language arts, especially at the middle school and high school level, there are books that are on the banned book list that are acceptable in some districts because of the clientele, because of the ethnicities, because of, for whatever reason, some of those books are okay. In other areas, in other communities, even books that are not on the banned book list, you wouldn't want to use in your classroom because parents are not going to look at those in favorable lights. You can plan to use the book, but not present the units, but present the units in a different order, which is exactly what I do with this book. I do have the textbook, and I use the textbook that we would use. I mean, I could have had you buy it, but I only use a few chapters out of it because they don't do things the way we need to do them for the EdTPA. It's very generic. You can delete units, or you can use some units in the book as they're written, but supplement with other material for additional units not covered or inadequately covered in the book. But again, you must go back to that curriculum guide. You must know what you're doing from one beginning of the year to the end of the year, where your kids came from, out of, where they're going to. You need to know what's happening in the grades below you and in the grades above you. I've always thought it would be a good thing if the lower grade teachers went to the high school, the middle school, and high school to see what those kids had to know. And in turn, I think it would be good for some of the high school, for the high school and the middle school teachers to come down, especially to the lower grades, to see how we have to deal with those kids to get them to the point where at high school you say, open your book to page 123, and they just do it. Yeah, well, they didn't do that when I had them. We had to teach that. We had to talk about that. We had to count. We had to figure that out. So there but you need to be very careful. You don't have to teach everything, but you have to be very, very careful. And one of the things right now with this is, as parents are becoming teachers at home, you have to be very careful what you skip and what you don't, or how you teach things or how you don't teach things, in case somebody has to come in and do it for you, just like what's going on now. The most adventuresome and creative teacher may even decide to use the textbook only as a resource and plan original teaching units for the subject. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Never let the textbook be the teacher. You are the teacher, not your textbook. You have to decide, but you have to work your curriculum with the curriculum guide or the curriculum map for the district, because that has been approved by the district. So how you get to those ends is up to you, but you have to stay within the curriculum guide, and you have to stay within the guidelines that the school has set forth. But don't be afraid to deviate. But when you do, you better have it planned out, because the principal may come after looking at your lesson plans. And yes, you're still going to have to turn in lesson plans even when you're teaching, not as detailed as the ones you're doing now, but you will be turning in lesson plans weekly. The principal is going to be looking at those lesson plans, and if they see something that seems a little out of out of whack, they may come asking you, looking at for you, and say, I notice you have this in your lesson plan. Why are you doing this? What are you hoping to accomplish here? You better be able to tell them, because if you don't, they're not gonna trust you with it. You should carefully consider the amount of time you want to allot to each unit you plan. Remember, we talked about this. Time management is crucial, and it is a booger sometimes. Trying to make sure you have enough time, trying to make sure that you're not skipping, you're stinting something because you're running out of time. Create a timeline, a chart, or calendar for each subject. Use it as you judge how much time to spend on each subtopic. I would also encourage you, if you're using a calendar or your lesson plans, as you write a lesson plan for each subject, and maybe you can only do English language arts 1 year, and maybe you can only do math for the next year. Put your standard in there. If you put your standard in every day for that lesson, by the end of the school year, you will have mapped the curriculum in your classroom. And then you can check it against it, you can constantly be checking against your curriculum guide at the school to make sure you're on track. For timeline planning, you divide the school year into weeks to months to quarters. I would suggest you start with quarters and then break it down to months and then break it down to weeks and then break it down to days. Don't start too small. Start big and work your way back down. And each subject can be subdivided into time segments. You're going to have a specific time segments at all levels, because you're only going to have so many moments in a school day to teach that particular subject to those kids. You may combine subjects into interdisciplinary units or cross curricular units, and you can have then combine them and have a longer period of time if you want. If you're going to put your social studies and your social and your reading class together, it may give you another 2 hours. Now, I will tell you, if you're teaching first and second grade, the vast majority of your day is going to be spent language arts and math. You're going to incorporate social studies and science, English, handwriting, all that, but it's going to be social reading and math. And you're going to have to incorporate everything else into those subject areas. Now, making reasonable and professional judgments about timeline planning depends on having information about your students' prior knowledge. And there it is. You have to activate that knowledge. You have to know your community. You have to be able to activate those kids' knowledge and their history of success or failure before the school year begins. Be very careful with that, because some kids don't shine in one person's classroom, but they may skyrocket in yours. You never know. The pace of your curriculum depends in some degree on the skills and knowledge your students have acquired before you meet them. If they can get it and go, you're good for you. If they need more time, they need more help, it may slow you down, and that's okay. But your own expectation for their success is also important. If you expect them to succeed and they know you expect them to succeed and do well, they will rise to the occasion much better than if you just give up on them, or you say, well, I know they'll never get this. Don't count them out. Give them a chance. Let them give it a go. If you expect them to succeed and be ready to move on to new challenges, then you need to provide them with those new challenges. They're much more likely to respond to your positive expectations. We've talked about this. We talked about this even when we were in class, when we were actually in physical class. You have to be very careful how you talk to these kids. You have to be very careful how you address these kids. You have to be very careful how you work with these kids, because they need to know that you think they're the smartest kid in the world. Even if they're struggling with something, they need to know that you think they can do it. It may take them longer, it may take more scaffolding and modeling, but they can do it if they just put their mind to it and you help them. Timelines you create at the beginning of the year don't need to be rigid and unchanging. You're going to have to be flexible. You're going to have to adjust on the fly. That will become much easier as you get more years of experience under your belt. They are guidelines. They are not set in stone. This stuff does not come down from Sinai. These are guidelines. As the year progresses, you're going to have to constantly monitor. You're going to have to constantly reflect. You'll undoubtedly have reasons to change your original timeline. You're going to have to adjust because of students' needs and their interests and successes. They're going to cause you to alter the pace of the original plan. You may have a concept that you didn't think they were going to have any trouble with, and they're struggling with it. You may have to stop and spend a little more time there, and in turn, maybe not so much on something else. Current events in the country, your local community, your classroom may cause you to add a new unit or stop what you're doing and have to work through some tragic events at the school or the community or in the country or the world. Interaction with other faculty may bring you fresh insights about how you want to organize the way you allocate your classroom. When you get into a school, find someone you feel is the master teacher. Talk to them, pick their brain. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Most new teachers are assigned a mentor teacher. They are assigned that mentor teacher because they are usually somebody that the principal trusts to guide a new teacher. Don't be afraid to talk to them and ask questions. And here I am again up against the timeline. So we're going to stop right there for now.